In the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts, be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am so delighted to be with you. Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure. This is my first visit to St. David. I'm Donna, McNiel. And he even spelled it right, which doesn't always happen, so that's why I'm treating. I am the Episcopal Missioner of Michigan State University and the Associate Director for Youth at All Saints Episcopal Church up the road with campus. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm here to plug campus ministry and hopefully strengthen our ties with one another, St. David's, Canterbury MSU, and campus ministry in general. So go green. Go green. Wait your turn. Michigan every time. We're gonna try that again. Go green. Go green. Go blue. Now it's your turn. See, just shake her. Just a girl. How many of you were involved in campus ministry when you were a student? A few of you? Yeah. Yeah. How many of you were involved in youth group? You were younger than that. Yeah, more. You might have noticed some changes in the church in recent years, perhaps. Pandemic has accelerated some of those, but those changes were already happening. Campus ministry is also dramatically different than it used to be. And the things that we have done in the past are not the things that we can continue to do, whether in a congregation or on campus. And we are involved in a grand experiment right now at Canterbury MSU. Almost a year ago, so right at 11 months, I did what I do every semester up until that point and kind of looked at property available for rent in downtown East Lansing near campus, because Canterbury MSU did not have a home of its own. We could meet at All Saints, but you know, it's very churchy, being a church and all. And it's just far enough away from campus that not everyone walked by it. You know, you had to be going there to get there. And so we had long passed the point where that's a place that students hung out or really even bothered to walk by. We've been meeting in coffee shops and things like that, but it limited what we could do. So I periodically would look at the property and, you know, despair over how expensive everything was in downtown East Lansing and then move on. Well, last March, I looked, and as I mentioned, we went through a pandemic, you may recall. I can't seem to wipe it out of my memory, sorry, one of the impacts of that was some businesses that closed. There was a dry cleaner down from where we are now that decided it was time to retire. It was a happy ending for them. But of course not for everybody. Some businesses in downtown East Lansing closed, and rents came down just a little bit. So we decided, the board of Canterbury MSU decided to rent a storefront property in downtown East Lansing. St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Lansing has been supporting students at MSU since the 1880s. They started sending priests to campus in the late 1880s, and they are really the grandmother church of the area. They started campus ministry, and then Canterbury started All Saints, not the other way around. And St. Paul's received a large request last year, so here's a plug for legacy giving and estate planning. They received a large request and are tithing on that request and decided to support campus ministry. So with their very significant financial help, we are renting this storefront in downtown East Lansing and have no clue what we're doing. We spent the summer with a bunch of really stalwart volunteers, I don't even know the words, dear volunteers who helped us remodel. We pounded concrete and pulled up flooring and painted the walls and put together IKEA furniture. I think I probably put together more IKEA furniture this summer than I had in all my previous lives, and I had put together some IKEA furniture because I was a grad student at one time. And created a space for students. And the thing that makes me most happy is everyone who comes in says, oh, this space feels so good. That's the thing I care about, and so it's working, but we really don't know what we're doing. Campus ministry has changed dramatically since any of us were students, and it's changed from the heydays that anyone remembers, and there's of course a long memory around Michigan State of campus ministry because it's been there so long. And people ask if we do the things we used to do, and the answer is always no. It just doesn't work that way anymore. You all know this. You know that the church is changing, that participation in the church is not perceived in the same way that it once was. And here's a painful little reality hit. The Survey Center on American Life a year ago found that Gen Z, so current college students, young college students and younger, is the least religious generation yet. More than a third, 34% of Generation Z are religiously unaffiliated. That's significantly larger than among millennials, which was 29%, and Gen X, my people, that are 25% religiously unaffiliated. So 1/3 of young adults and older youth are now religiously unaffiliated. And we see that on our sidewalk. So we have this storefront property and this great little patch of sidewalk. And you know, we see students walk by all the time. And many of them who like that we have a rainbow flag in the window, and we have a quote from the presiding bishop that says, if it's not about love, you know the end? You don't know this quote? Oh, we're going to practice this then. If it's not about love, it's not about God. If it's not about love,
it's not about God.
If it's not about love,
it's not about God.
They'll call a response there. Or if it's not about love,
it's not about God.
Very good. So we have that in our window. And I notice young adults and students seeing that and maybe going, oh, wow, you know, a church that, you know, has a rainbow flag, or, you know, love. But that doesn't mean that they have any interest in participating. You know, they may like that we're there and that we're not hateful, but they don't feel any need to be involved in that. So our work is very different and a whole lot harder than it used to be. And we are trying to figure out what that means and how to do it. We're doing a lot of experiments, and a lot of things are not working, and some things are, and we're trying to repeat those things. My colleague Kit Carlson sat out on the sidewalk one day and offered to write poems for people, and much to my surprise, I would say, do you need a poem? And they'd stop and go, I do need a poem. And so then she would write a poem for them in a couple of minutes while I chit-chatted with them, and it was great, and we got to make a connection. So we're looking at things like that, which is so different from the way campus ministry used to work, even 20 years ago when I started ministry on a college campus. That's the life of the church today. The things that we have done in the past are not going to work in the future. And campus ministry is at the front edge of that. We're hitting those young people first before they become older people and the middle-aged people and the old people. We're trying to get to them first, but it's hard. It's no longer true that when young people and young families begin to have kids, then they decide to go to church. That doesn't happen anymore. That used to be something that we took for granted. When I was first starting in ministry, I would have people tell me all the time, oh, don't worry, they'll come when they have kids. It's not true. They have been raised without faith, and they see no need to impose faith on their children, which is how they experience it. We have a lot of work to do in the world. And there are so many different ways to follow Jesus. Not just all the churches who pass on the way here, but all kinds of other models. Do you all know about Plainsong Farm? It's a ministry in Western Michigan. I was actually thinking about it in West. In Western Michigan, run by Nuria Love Parrish. That's what I thought, and then it sounded wrong in my head. And it's a whole ministry that's based around farming and sustainable farming and teaching ecology and nurturing and reaching out to people who care about ecology and then linking that to spirituality. Brilliant model. In New York City, there's a dinner church that gathers. First, they gather and prepare dinner together, and then sit around at big tables and eat and worship and do Bible study. They have messy church from time to time for kids and families. They're trying out all kinds of models of gathering together for a meal and worshiping together, which sounds an awful lot like the early church to me. What we do on Sunday mornings is the same thing I do on Sunday mornings at All Saints when I'm not here or somewhere else. This is not the way most people, I think, are going to fade in the future. This model will persist. There will be those of us who love to gather on a Sunday morning this way, who want to hear a choir, particularly we Episcopalians who like to put on, weird clothes, fancy clothes that really don't make any sense in our culture anymore, but are really fun, and procession and, ring bells and carry crosses. The drum this morning is particularly lovely. There will be those of us who continue to need to worship this way, for whom it nurtures our spirit. But it won't, I think, be the most common. Maybe it's the anchor that helps nourish the other ways of being. But we have to figure out myriad ways of worshiping Jesus Christ and following Jesus Christ and nurturing faithfulness to Jesus Christ. That's some of what Paul was up to in Corinth, particularly if I stretch the lesson a little bit. So as I said earlier, Paul goes to Corinth, and you all know, you've heard this often enough, that Corinth was this big bustling city. It was this crossroads. Everyone and their dog lived in Corinth. I assume there were dogs, and no doubt many cats. All kinds of people, all kinds of religions, and all kinds of ways of being. And Paul plants a church there that seems not to have been the easiest place to be. Paul is not happy with the Corinthians in his letters. He has a few bones to pick, and he's arguing with them. They're not his favorite people. He talks like Ephesians, all lovey-dovey. He's mad at Corinth more often than not, it seems. And in this morning's lesson, he's mad because the pastor that he sent, or that went later, Apollos, has been with him, and so now they've created these factions, the Paulus and the Apollos, or whatever they call themselves. Not unlike Presbyterians and Episcopalians, or Lutherans and Baptists. We Protestants are really good at that. And they're arguing with each other within the church. You have to follow. Now, I know from our conversation earlier this morning that some of you have been here a long time. Do some of you remember priests before Chris Y'all? Yeah. Was there any conflict when priests changed? Were there people who, we want it the way it used to be with Father so-and-so, and then comes this interloper and changes things, because how can you not? Because we're different. I mean, even if you try not to, you're not, we can't do it the same way as we would. I mean, have there ever been fights here at those times of transition? No? Well, you would be the first. Frankly, I don't believe you. I say that with great love. we humans do that. We pick sides, and change is hard, and we do that. But Paul's point is, it doesn't matter that whether you were baptized by Paul or baptized by Apollos, whether you gather in a church on a Sunday morning like this, or whether you gather on a Thursday night around a dinner table and pray and worship. It doesn't matter if we're following Jesus Christ, if we're trying to support one another in our wrestling of faith, as we're talking about this morning, if we're looking toward the cross and seeking to follow Jesus Christ, that's the part that matters. And churches like St. David's, like All Saints, like St. Paul's and Lansing, healthy, strong, creative congregations need to find and nurture the different ways of being faith. It's hard because we want things to always be the same. But if we want there to be a future, we have to also find ways to nurture the new and different things we're doing. At Canterbury, as I said, that looks like trying a program. We tried a Sunday evening vesper service at our storefront property last semester. By the middle of the semester, I was like, yeah, no, this is over. No, we had some parishioners from All Saints coming, but they really would rather do it at All Saints, and no students coming. Okay, well, that's helpful information. This is not good. So we end it and move on to the next experiment. We have to be willing to take those kinds of risks and those failures if we want this to continue, and to not cling to the way we've always done it, which are known as the 7 last words of the church. The invitation for us as Christians in the 21st century is to be brave and bold and to loosen up and to celebrate everything we see that looks like Jesus. Everything we see that's people seeking to understand who God is and how God is at work in the world. That's our invitation. However much we like to gather this way, to celebrate and nurture and fund and visit all the other ways that God's people are gathering. I spent much of this past week with an old friend of mine, Dr. Tony Keith Jr. He is a spoken word artist and poet, and dear friend. We sailed on a semester at sea voyage 13 years ago. We were staff members, and we kept saying last week that we hadn't seen each other in 13 years since we got off the ship, but it felt like it had been like last Thursday. We just sort of picked up where we left off, which is, the best thing about old friends. He's an amazing poet, and you can Google him and find him on YouTube, Dr. Tony Keith Jr. But he said in his poem several times, he says that he is not a religious man. And I know what he means by that. He, for a whole host of reasons, including a father who was a Baptist preacher, he grew frustrated with the traditions and regulations and limitations of the church. And yet, as I listened to his poetry and listened to him, and we renewed our friendship, everything he talks about is love. And he said, my religion is love. He was like, well, you're a man of faith. that's it. And in his poetry, he talks about struggling to be loving and kind and faithful and to seek inspiration and hope and promise. That's who we're called to be. And in Tony, my friend, who will not be in a church this morning, but maybe on a stage this evening, he is proclaiming the gospel. Which I said to him, he went, really? I'm going to think about that. I'm going to write home about that. There are expressions of Jesus Christ going on in the world all around us. I think part of our privilege as those who gather here is to name them, is to say to our friends, to say to people we know, I see Jesus in you. And it's okay if you don't show up to church. I'm not trying to make that happen, but I see Jesus in you. I think we have an opportunity to do that, and perhaps that's the way we're being called into the future. To not fight about Paul or Apollos, or St. David's or All Saints or Episcopal Presbyterian, but to simply look for Jesus Christ and name it when we see it. Amen.
Amen.